Have you ever wondered why a relationship that seemed so promising suddenly lost its spark? Why a man who was once attentive and engaged gradually became distant, and you couldn't quite put your finger on what changed? Here's something most women never realize. It's often not the big, dramatic moments that push men away. It's the small, almost invisible patterns we fall into without even noticing. The subtle habits that seem harmless, even caring, but quietly erode the very attraction that brought you together in the first place. Today, we're going to talk about 7 of these habits. 7 patterns that mature women, especially those who've been through relationships before, unconsciously develop. And here's what makes this so important. These aren't character flaws. These aren't reasons to feel ashamed or broken. These are learned behaviors, protective mechanisms, and sometimes just the result of past experiences teaching us the wrong lessons. But understanding them gives you power. The power to recognize them, address them, and create the kind of connection you truly deserve. Welcome back to The Heart Code, where we dive deep into the psychology of relationships, attraction, and human connection. I'm here to help you understand not just what happens in relationships, but why it happens, so you can make conscious, empowered choices about your love life. Before we dive into today's topic, I want to ask you for something. If this video resonates with you, if you find yourself nodding along or having those aha moments, please take a second to hit that like button. It helps more women discover this content and benefit from these insights. And if you're new here, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss a video. We release content regularly that's designed to help you navigate the complex world of modern relationships with wisdom and clarity. Also, I love hearing from you in the comments. Share your thoughts, your experiences, your questions. This community is built on honest conversation and mutual support. And if you really want to support the work we do here, creating this in-depth, ad-free content for you, consider using the Super Thanks feature below this video. It directly supports the channel and helps us continue bringing you this level of detailed psychological insight. Now, let's talk about these 7 subtle habits, and I want to be clear from the start. This isn't about blaming you or making you feel like you're doing something wrong. This is about awareness, because once you're aware of these patterns, once you can see them clearly, you can choose differently. You can choose behaviors that serve your happiness and create the kind of relationship dynamic you actually want. As mature women, we bring so much to relationships. We bring wisdom, life experience, emotional depth, independence, and a clarity about what we want that younger women often don't have yet. These are incredible strengths, but sometimes along with that experience, we've also picked up some defensive patterns, some habits born from past hurts or societal conditioning that, despite our best intentions, push away the very connection we're seeking. So let's explore these 7 habits together, not from a place of criticism, but from a place of growth and empowerment. Habit 1. Over-functioning in the relationship. Let's start with something that might seem counterintuitive. The first habit that can make men lose interest is what psychologists call over-functioning. This is when you do too much for the relationship, when you take on more than your share of the emotional labor, the planning, the initiating, the problem-solving. And on the surface, this seems like it should be a good thing, right? You're showing you care, you're being proactive, you're making sure the relationship runs smoothly. But here's what actually happens. When you consistently overfunction in a relationship, you inadvertently create an imbalance. You position yourself as the pursuer, the manager, the one who cares more. And relationships thrive on balance, on reciprocity, on the natural dance between giving and receiving. Think about it this way. When you're always the one planning the dates, initiating the conversations, checking in emotionally, solving problems before he even notices they exist, what role does that leave for him? What space does he have to show up, to contribute, to pursue you? You've essentially taken up all the oxygen in the room. This habit often develops from past experiences where you felt let down, where you learned that if you wanted something done, you had to do it yourself. Maybe you were in a relationship with someone passive or unreliable, and you developed this pattern as a survival mechanism. Or maybe you've internalized messages from society that women need to be accommodating, flexible, always smoothing things over. Maybe you're afraid that if you don't hold everything together, things will fall apart. But here's the paradox. The more you do, the less he does. The more you overfunction, the more he underfunctions. And over time, this creates a dynamic where you feel exhausted and resentful. And he feels increasingly unnecessary and emasculated, even if he can't articulate why. Men, particularly emotionally mature men, want to feel needed, not in a childish, dependent way, but in a meaningful, contributory way. They want to feel like their presence matters, like they're adding value to your life, like they have something important to offer. When you're constantly handling everything, constantly ahead of every need, constantly solving every problem, you rob him of the opportunity to be that person for you. Let me give you a concrete example. Imagine you're dating someone, and every single time you get together, you're the one who suggests it. You're the one who picks the restaurant, makes the reservation, sometimes even drives to pick him up. You're the one who asks how his day was, who remembers to check in about that stressful work situation he mentioned last week, who plans thoughtful surprises. And he shows up, enjoys it, appreciates it, but never really initiates much himself. At first, you might think, well, he's busy. I don't mind taking the lead. But months go by, and you start to notice a subtle shift. The excitement fades, he seems less engaged. And you find yourself planning more, doing more, trying harder to recapture that initial spark. But the more you do, the less interested he seems to become. What's happening here? It's not that he doesn't appreciate what you're doing, it's that the dynamic itself has become unattractive. The pursuit, the mystery, the challenge that naturally exists in balanced relationships has disappeared. You've made it too easy. You've made yourself too available, too accommodating, too much of a sure thing. And here's something crucial to understand. Masculine energy, at its core, is energized by purpose, by mission, by the pursuit of something meaningful. When you remove the need for him to pursue, when you've already done all the pursuing, when there's no mountain to climb because you've built an escalator, you drain the relationship of that natural masculine drive. This doesn't mean playing games or being artificially unavailable. It means honoring the natural dynamic of pursuit and receptivity that creates attraction. It means creating space for him to show up, to contribute, to feel like he's winning your affection, rather than having it handed to him on a platter. The fix here isn't to suddenly stop caring or to withdraw completely. It's to consciously pull back, to create space, to let him step forward. It's to resist the urge to fill every silence, solve every problem, plan every moment. It's to trust that if he's genuinely interested, he'll meet you halfway. And if he doesn't, well, that's valuable information too. Think about the beginning of a relationship, those early stages when everything feels electric and exciting. What creates that excitement? It's the uncertainty, the wondering, the back and forth, the natural rhythm of pursuit and retreat. When you overfunction, you eliminate that natural rhythm. You create a one-sided dynamic where you're doing all the pursuing and he's simply receiving. Overfunctioning also sends an unconscious message. I don't trust you to show up. I don't believe you're capable of meeting my needs unless I orchestrate everything. And men pick up on this message, even if it's never spoken. It communicates a lack of faith in their capacity to be a good partner, and that lack of faith is fundamentally unattractive. Moreover, when you're constantly overfunctioning, You're not giving yourself the gift of discernment. You're not allowing yourself to see who this person actually is when left to their own devices. You're seeing who they are when you're doing all the heavy lifting, which isn't really them at all. It's a version of them propped up by your efforts. Healthy relationships require both people to show up, to contribute, to care actively. When you overfunction, you create a relationship with a parent-child dynamic rather than a partnership of equals. And that dynamic is the death of romantic attraction. So how do you break this habit? First, you have to recognize it. Pay attention to the patterns in your relationship. Are you always the one initiating contact, planning dates, remembering important details, solving problems? If the answer is yes, you're overfunctioning. Second, you have to consciously create space. This might feel uncomfortable at first, especially if you're used to being in control. Try waiting for him to text first sometimes. Let him suggest the next date. When he mentions a problem, resist the urge to immediately solve it for him. Instead, ask him what he thinks he should do. Trust him to handle things. Third, focus on receiving. This is a muscle that many strong, independent women have allowed to atrophy. Practice saying yes when he offers to do something for you. Practice accepting help, accepting planning, accepting his contributions without micromanaging or taking over. And finally, be willing to see what happens when you stop overfunctioning. If he steps up, meets you halfway, starts contributing more, then you know you have someone capable of being an equal partner. If he doesn't, if the relationship falters when you stop doing all the work, then it wasn't a real partnership to begin with. And wouldn't you rather know that sooner rather than later? Remember, a healthy relationship isn't about one person doing all the work while the other coasts. It's about two people actively choosing each other, actively contributing, actively caring. When you overfunction, you deny both yourself and him the opportunity to have that kind of relationship. Habit 2, leading with logic instead of emotion. The second habit that can quietly erode attraction is something many accomplished, intelligent women fall into without realizing. Leading with logic instead of emotion in your intimate relationships. Now, before you think I'm suggesting you become irrational or overly emotional, hear me out. This is nuanced, and it's about understanding the difference between how we navigate professional life and how we create intimate connection. As mature women, especially those who've built careers, raised families, managed households, we've often had to develop strong logical, analytical capabilities. We've had to be rational, reasonable, strategic. We've had to set aside our emotions at times to get things done, to be taken seriously, to survive in environments that didn't always value feminine perspectives. These are valuable skills. They've served you well in many areas of life. But here's where it gets tricky. What works in the boardroom? What works when you're managing a budget or negotiating a contract or solving a problem doesn't necessarily create intimacy and attraction in romantic relationships. In fact, it often does the opposite. When you primarily lead with logic in your intimate relationship, when you approach emotional situations like problems to be solved, when you intellectualize feelings rather than feeling them, you create a certain distance. You put up a wall between your true self and your partner, and that wall, however rational and protective it might be, prevents the deep emotional connection that sustains attraction over time. Let me paint a picture of what this looks like in practice. Your partner comes home stressed about something at work. He's venting, clearly frustrated, and your immediate response is to jump into problem-solving mode. You analyze the situation, offer logical solutions, create a strategic plan for how he should handle it. You think you're being helpful, supportive, showing your intelligence and capability. But what does he really need in that moment? Often he doesn't need a consultant or a life coach. He needs a partner who can meet him emotionally, who can simply be present with his feelings without trying to fix them. He needs someone who can say, "That sounds really frustrating," and just let him feel what he's feeling without immediately trying to solve it. Or consider this scenario. You're having a disagreement about something in the relationship. Maybe it's about how often you see each other, or about different expectations for the future. And your approach is entirely rational. You lay out the facts, present your case like a lawyer, use logic to prove your point. You're calm, collected, reasonable. But underneath that logical exterior, you're actually hurt or scared or disappointed. You're feeling something real and vulnerable. But you've learned to package those feelings in rational arguments because you don't trust that your emotions alone are valid or worthy of consideration. You've learned that feelings need to be justified with logic, to be taken seriously. What happens when you do this? The conversation stays surface level. You're talking about logistics and practicalities, but you're not actually connecting about what's really going on underneath. He can sense that there's something more, something you're not saying, but the wall of logic keeps him from getting to it. And over time, that distance accumulates. Here's what many women don't realize. Men, despite stereotypes to the contrary, are drawn to emotional authenticity in their intimate relationships. Not drama, not manipulation, but genuine emotional honesty. When you're willing to be vulnerable, to share what you're actually feeling without dressing it up in logical arguments, it creates intimacy. It gives him something real to connect with. Think about it from his perspective. When you're constantly in your head, analyzing, rationalizing, strategizing, what is there for him to connect with? He's not connecting with your heart, with your true self. He's connecting with your representative, the polished, controlled version of you that you show to the world. And that might be impressive, but it's not intimate. This habit often develops from a few different places. For many women, especially those who've experienced emotional invalidation in the past, leading with logic is a protective mechanism. Maybe you grew up in an environment where emotions were dismissed or punished. Maybe you had a parent who responded to feelings with, "Stop being so sensitive," or "That's not a real problem." So you learned to translate your feelings into logic because logic was safer, more acceptable, more likely to be heard. Or maybe you've been burned in past relationships by being too emotionally open. Maybe you were vulnerable with someone who used that vulnerability against you, or who couldn't handle your emotions, or who made you feel like your feelings were too much. So you developed this armor of rationality to protect yourself from being hurt again. Or perhaps you've simply internalized societal messages that rational is better than emotional, that logic is more valid than feeling, that strong women don't let their emotions show. You've spent years developing this logical, competent persona, and you've brought that same approach into your intimate relationships. But here's the truth. Emotional connection is the foundation of romantic attraction. When you consistently lead with logic instead of emotion, you starve the relationship of that essential ingredient. You create a partnership that might function well on paper, but lacks the depth, the passion, the aliveness that makes love feel worth having. This doesn't mean you should be emotionally uncontrolled or use your feelings to manipulate. It means being willing to share your emotional truth, even when it feels vulnerable. It means saying, "I feel hurt when this happens," instead of building a logical case for why what he did was wrong. It means expressing, "I miss you and want to spend more time together," instead of presenting a rational argument about the benefits of quality time. There's a profound difference between these approaches. One invites connection and understanding. The other invites debate and defense. When you share your feelings directly, without wrapping them in logic, you give your partner something they can respond to on an emotional level. They can meet you where you are. They can comfort you, reassure you, adjust their behavior out of care for your feelings, rather than out of logical agreement with your arguments. But when you intellectualize everything, when you turn every emotional issue into a rational problem to solve, you rob the relationship of its emotional color. Everything becomes transactional, strategic, calculated, and that's exhausting. It's also deeply unattractive because it suggests you're not fully present, not fully engaged, not fully yourself. Men often describe this experience as feeling like they're in a business meeting rather than a relationship. They feel like they're being managed rather than loved. And while they might not be able to articulate exactly what's wrong, they feel the distance, they sense the wall. And gradually, that sense of distance translates into diminished attraction. There's another aspect to this worth exploring. When you lead with logic, you also tend to control your expressiveness. You keep your face neutral, your voice modulated, your body language closed. You present as unaffected, in control, untouchable. And while this might feel powerful, it actually disconnects you from the full range of human experience that makes intimacy possible. Think about moments when you felt most connected to someone. Were they moments of careful, rational discussion, or were they moments of genuine emotional sharing, of laughter, of tears, of authentic expression? Intimacy lives in the emotional realm. You can't think your way into deep connection. You have to feel your way there. Moreover, when you're always in your logical mind, you're not fully present in your body. You're not accessing your intuition, your gut feelings, your emotional wisdom. You're cutting yourself off from sources of information that are crucial for navigating relationships successfully. Your emotions tell you things that logic can't. They tell you when something's wrong, even if you can't rationally explain why. They tell you when you're happy, when you feel safe, when you're compromising too much, when you need more. When you override your emotions with logic, you lose access to this vital guidance system. So how do you break this habit if you recognize it in yourself? First, you have to give yourself permission to feel. This might sound simple, but for women who've spent years suppressing or rationalizing their emotions, it's actually a significant shift. Practice checking in with yourself throughout the day. What am I feeling right now? Not what am I thinking, but what am I feeling? Second, practice sharing those feelings directly without justifying them. Instead of saying, I think we should spend more time together because research shows that couples who spend quality time together have stronger relationships. Try saying, I miss you. I want more time with just us. The second statement is vulnerable and true. The first is defended and distanced. Third, resist the urge to immediately solve emotional issues. When he's upset about something, or when you're upset about something, try just being with the feeling before jumping to problem solving. Let emotions have their moment without rushing to resolve them through logic. Fourth, pay attention to your body. Your body holds emotional truth that your mind often tries to rationalize away. If your stomach clenches when you're around him, if your shoulders relax when he hugs you, if you feel energized or drained after spending time together, these bodily sensations are valuable information. Don't dismiss them because they don't make logical sense. And finally, understand that being emotional doesn't make you weak or out of control. Emotional authenticity is actually a form of strength. It takes courage to feel your feelings fully and share them honestly. It takes vulnerability to let someone see you in your emotional truth, rather than hiding behind a wall of logic. The goal isn't to become illogical or to make all decisions based on feelings. It's to integrate both sides of yourself, to access both your emotional and rational intelligence in appropriate measure. In your intimate relationships, that means leading more with your heart and less with your head. It means trusting that your emotions are valid, that they deserve to be expressed, and that sharing them honestly creates the intimacy that sustains attraction. When you can do this, when you can show up as a fully feeling, emotionally authentic woman, you become infinitely more attractive. Not because you're being dramatic or irrational, but because you're being real. And that realness, that vulnerability, that emotional availability is what creates lasting connection. Habit 3, making him the center of your world. The third habit that can cause men to lose interest is something that might seem loving and devoted on the surface, making him the center of your world. Reorganizing your life, your priorities, your identity around him and the relationship. And I know this seems counterintuitive. Shouldn't focusing on your relationship and prioritizing your partner be a good thing? Isn't that what commitment looks like? But here's the paradox. The more you make him the center of your world, the less interesting you become. The more you revolve around him, the less he's drawn to you. Because what attracted him in the first place wasn't the promise of being your entire world. It was the fullness of your world, the richness of your life, the interesting person you were before you made him your sole focus. Think about when you first met. You had your own life, your own interests, your own friends, your own passions, your own goals. You were this complete, fascinating person with depth and dimension. You had things going on. You had stories to tell. You brought energy and excitement from the various aspects of your life. That wholeness, that independence, that full life you were living was part of what made you attractive. But then, somewhere along the way, especially as feelings deepened, you started pulling back from other areas of your life. Maybe you canceled plans with friends to be available for him. Maybe you let hobbies slide because you wanted to spend every free moment together. Maybe you started making every decision through the filter of, what does this mean for the relationship? Instead of, what do I want? You thought you were being a good partner, showing your commitment, demonstrating how important he is to you. But what you actually did was shrink yourself. You contracted your world until he was the only thing in it. And that contraction, however loving it might feel, is profoundly unattractive. Let me explain why. When you make someone the center of your world, you put an enormous amount of pressure on them. They become responsible for your happiness, your fulfillment, your sense of purpose. That's a heavy burden. It's exhausting, and it's impossible for any one person to fulfill. Imagine being in his position. When you first met this person, they had this rich, full life. They were passionate about their work. They had interesting friends. They pursued hobbies. They had goals and dreams that existed independent of you. That fullness made them interesting. It gave you things to talk about, things to discover, new facets to explore. But now everything revolves around you. They're always available. They've dropped other priorities to accommodate you. They check in constantly. Their mood depends entirely on how things are going with you. When you're happy, they're happy. When you're distant, they're devastated. They have no emotional stability outside of the relationship. How does that feel? At first, it might feel flattering, but pretty quickly, it starts to feel suffocating. It feels like too much responsibility. It feels like you can't breathe without affecting their entire world. And instead of drawing you closer, it actually pushes you away. There's a principle in psychology called maintaining mystery and separateness. For attraction to stay alive, there needs to be some space, some separateness, some mystery. You need to maintain your own identity, your own life, your own experiences that don't include your partner. Because that separateness is what keeps things interesting. It's what keeps there being more to discover, more to talk about, more reasons to come together. When you make him the center of your world, you eliminate that healthy separateness. You become enmeshed, and enmeshment kills attraction because there's no tension, no coming together and pulling apart, no independence to appreciate. This habit often develops from a place of insecurity. Maybe you're afraid that if you don't make him your priority, he'll think you don't care. Maybe you're worried that if you maintain your own separate life, he'll feel neglected or look elsewhere. Maybe past relationships have taught you that men need constant attention, and reassurance. Or maybe this pattern comes from a fear of losing yourself in past relationships where you felt unseen or unimportant. So now you overcorrect, making sure your partner knows they're the most important thing, that you'd drop anything for them, that they come first always. You think this prevents them from feeling how you felt before. But the truth is, a healthy relationship isn't about making your partner the center of your world. It's about two people who each have their own full worlds, choosing to create a shared world together. You bring your wholeness to meet his wholeness, and together you build something new without either of you losing yourselves in the process. When you have your own life, your own interests, your own friendships, your own goals, you're infinitely more attractive, not because you're playing hard to get, but because you're genuinely interesting. You have experiences that don't include him. You have growth happening in areas that aren't about the relationship. You have energy and vitality that comes from multiple sources, not just from his attention and approval. Think about it practically. When you have your own life, you have things to talk about. You come back from time with friends with stories. You come back from pursuing your interests energized and happy. You're not sitting around waiting for him to make plans, to decide what you're doing, to give your life meaning and direction. You're living actively, and he gets to be part of that active life. There's also something crucial here about respect. When you maintain your own identity and priorities, you show that you respect yourself. You demonstrate that you have boundaries, that you won't compromise your entire existence for anyone, that you value yourself enough to maintain your own life, and that self-respect is deeply attractive. Conversely, when you drop everything for him, when you have no boundaries, when you're infinitely flexible and accommodating to the point of losing yourself, it sends a message. I don't think I'm valuable enough to have my own life. I need you to give me purpose and meaning. And that's not attractive. It's not because men want to be with someone who doesn't care about them. It's because they want to be with someone who has options, who has a full life, who chooses them but doesn't need them for their basic sense of identity and worth. There's a beautiful quote that applies here. Love is not two people looking at each other, but two people looking in the same direction. When you make him the center of your world, you're staring at him constantly. When you maintain your own life and goals, you're standing beside him, both of you looking forward, supporting each other's journeys while also having your own. Let me give you a practical example. You start dating someone wonderful. In the beginning, you continue with your weekly book club, your yoga classes, your girls' nights, your volunteer work. You're excited about your career. You're pursuing a certification or learning a new skill. Your life is full and varied, but as the relationship deepens, you start thinking, I should be more available, I should prioritize him more. So you skip book club because he's free that evening. You stop going to yoga as regularly because you don't want to miss time with him. Girls' nights become less frequent. The volunteer work gets put on hold. The certification sits unfinished because you're spending all your free time focused on the relationship. At first, he might not notice consciously, but over weeks and months, something shifts. The conversations become more circular, covering the same territory because you don't have new experiences feeding your life. You're less independent, more checking in about plans, more looking to him to fill your time. You're less vibrant because you're not doing the things that energize you. And gradually, almost imperceptibly, his interest wanes. It's not that he doesn't care about you, it's that you've become less of the person he was initially attracted to. The full, passionate, independent woman he met has been replaced by someone whose world revolves entirely around him. And that's less interesting, less attractive, less exciting. The fix for this habit is simultaneously simple and challenging. Maintain your own life. Keep your friendships active, pursue your interests, have goals that exist outside the relationship. Say no, sometimes, not to play games, but because you genuinely have other commitments that matter to you. Don't be infinitely available. Have a life worth protecting. This might feel scary, especially if you're worried about losing him. You might think, if I'm not always available, if I'm not making him the priority, he'll lose interest or find someone else. But the opposite is true. When you have your own life, when you're not desperately clinging to the relationship as your only source of identity and happiness, you become more attractive, not less. There's also something important about modeling healthy relationship dynamics. When you maintain your own life, you give him permission to maintain his. You create a relationship where both people can breathe, can have space, can be individuals as well as a couple. That's the kind of relationship that sustains long-term. And honestly, it's better for your own well-being too. When you make someone else the center of your world, you become incredibly vulnerable. If the relationship ends, if he disappoints you, if things don't work out, you've lost everything because you've put everything into that one basket. When you maintain your own life, you have stability outside the relationship. You have support, interests, goals, and identity that exist regardless of whether this particular relationship works out. Remember, you are a whole person, not half a person looking for your other half to complete you. You're complete as you are, and you're inviting another complete person to share in your full life. That's what creates sustainable, healthy, attractive relationship dynamics. So maintain your friendships. Keep pursuing your passions. Have goals that exist outside the relationship. Be willing to say, I can't see you tonight, I have plans. And mean it, not as a game, but as genuine respect for your own life and commitments. Be the interesting, full, vibrant person you were when he met you. That's who he was attracted to. Don't lose her in an attempt to prove your love. Habit 4, excessive reassurance-seeking. The fourth habit that can push men away is something that often comes from a place of vulnerability, but manifests as excessive reassurance-seeking. This is when you constantly need validation, confirmation, and reassurance about the relationship, about his feelings, about where things are going, about whether he still cares. And while seeking some reassurance is normal and healthy, excessive reassurance-seeking creates a draining dynamic that erodes attraction over time. This habit shows up in various ways. It might be constantly asking, do you still love me? Or are you happy with me? Or is everything okay with us? It might be needing him to repeatedly confirm his commitment, to prove his feelings, to reassure you that he's not losing interest. It might be interpreting every minor shift in his behavior as a sign that something's wrong, and then seeking reassurance to calm your anxiety. Here's why this becomes problematic. When you constantly need reassurance, you're essentially asking him to manage your emotional security. You're making your sense of stability in the relationship his responsibility, rather than cultivating that stability within yourself. And that's exhausting. It puts him in a position where he feels like he can never quite do enough, where his words and actions are constantly being questioned and doubted, where the relationship feels precarious and high maintenance rather than secure and stable. Let me break down what happens psychologically. Every time you seek reassurance, you're communicating to him, whether you mean to or not, that you don't really believe or trust his previous reassurances. If you ask him if he loves you, and he says yes, but then you ask again the next day, and the day after that, you're essentially telling him that his words don't hold weight with you. You're demonstrating that you don't really trust what he says, that his expressions of care and commitment aren't enough. This creates a frustrating dynamic for him. He feels like he's constantly trying to fill a bucket with a hole in the bottom. No matter how much reassurance he provides, it drains away, and you need more. That's demoralizing. It makes him feel ineffective as a partner. It makes him question whether anything he does or says will ever be enough for you to feel secure. Moreover, excessive reassurance-seeking often comes from a place of anxiety and insecurity that actually has nothing to do with him or the relationship. It's usually rooted in past experiences, in old wounds, in attachment patterns formed long before he came into the picture. Maybe you were abandoned or betrayed in the past. Maybe you grew up with inconsistent caregivers. Maybe previous relationships taught you that love is unreliable and conditional. These are real, valid reasons for feeling insecure. But here's the hard truth: he can't heal those wounds for you. No amount of reassurance from him can fix insecurity that comes from within. You could be with the most devoted, consistent, loving partner in the world. And if you have deep-seated insecurity, you'll still find reasons to doubt, still need constant reassurance, still feel anxious about the relationship. And when you make your internal insecurity his problem to solve, when you expect him to constantly prop up your sense of security, you're asking him to do something impossible. He can't reach into your past and heal those wounds. He can't rewire your attachment patterns. He can't fill a void that exists within you. What he can do is be a consistent, caring, honest partner. But you have to be able to receive that, to let it in, to let his consistency build trust over time, rather than immediately doubting it and seeking more reassurance. There's another aspect to this worth exploring. Excessive reassurance-seeking is inherently unattractive because it signals a lack of self-worth and confidence. When you constantly need validation from outside yourself, when your emotional security depends on his words and actions, it suggests that you don't have a solid sense of your own value and lovability. Confidence is attractive. Not arrogance, not pretending you're perfect, but genuine self-assurance. The kind that says, I know I'm valuable. I know I bring something worthwhile to this relationship. I don't need constant external validation to know my worth. When you have that internal security, you don't need to constantly check if he still cares, because you trust that you're worth caring about. Conversely, constant reassurance-seeking communicates, I'm not sure I'm lovable. I'm not sure I'm enough. Please confirm that you still want me. And while that might evoke compassion, it's not sexy. It doesn't inspire desire. It inspires a caretaking response, which is fine in moderation, but becomes burdensome when it's constant. Think about the early stages of dating when you probably weren't seeking as much reassurance. You had more confidence, more sense of your own value. You were less invested in the outcome. If he was interested, great. If not, you'd move on. That confidence was attractive. But as feelings deepened, as you became more attached, you might have started feeling more insecure, more afraid of losing what you now value. So the reassurance-seeking increased. But that increased neediness often has the opposite effect of what you intend. Instead of holding him closer, it pushes him away. There's also a self-fulfilling prophecy at play here. When you constantly seek reassurance because you're afraid he's losing interest, your behavior, the constant questioning and doubt, can actually cause him to lose interest. Not because your fears were founded, but because the dynamic itself becomes draining. Your anxiety about losing him contributes to actually losing him. Let me give you an example of how this plays out. You notice he seems a bit quiet one evening. Instead of accepting that he might just be tired or preoccupied with something from work, you immediately interpret this as a sign that something's wrong with the relationship. So you ask, is everything okay with us? He reassures you that yes, everything's fine, he's just had a long day. But you're not satisfied. His slightly distant mood triggered your insecurity, and his reassurance didn't fully calm it. So over the next few days, you continue checking in. You still love me, right? You're not having second thoughts about us? You'd tell me if something was wrong? Each time he reassures you, but each time he also feels a little more drained, a little more like he's being questioned and doubted. Eventually, he might start to withdraw, not because he doesn't care, but because the constant reassurance-seeking has made the relationship feel heavy and burdensome. And then, ironically, you have actual reason to worry because his withdrawal confirms your fears, even though your fears and the behavior they prompted caused the withdrawal in the first place. So, how do you break this pattern? First, you have to recognize it. Pay attention to how often you're seeking reassurance. If you find yourself repeatedly asking the same questions, needing him to confirm his feelings, checking in about the relationship status, looking for validation, you're probably overdoing it. Second, you have to do the internal work. Examine where your insecurity comes from. Is it based on his actual behavior, or is it based on past experiences? Has he given you real reasons to doubt his commitment, or are you projecting old fears onto a new relationship? Often, it's the latter. Understanding the source of your insecurity helps you address it appropriately rather than making it his problem to fix. Third, practice self-soothing. When you feel the urge to seek reassurance, pause, sit with the discomfort. Remind yourself of the evidence you have of his care and commitment. Look at his actions over time rather than obsessing about one moment or one interaction. Learn to calm your own anxiety rather than immediately reaching out for external validation. Fourth, build your sense of self-worth independent of the relationship. Engage in activities that make you feel confident and capable. Cultivate friendships and interests that give you value outside of his opinions. Develop a strong internal sense of who you are and what you offer. When you know your worth, you don't need constant external confirmation of it. Fifth, trust his actions more than your anxiety. If he's consistently showing up, treating you well, demonstrating care and commitment through his behavior, trust that. Don't let temporary fluctuations in mood or minor inconsistencies override the pattern of care he's demonstrated. People have bad days, stressful weeks, moments of distraction. That doesn't necessarily mean anything about the relationship. And finally, communicate your needs differently. Instead of seeking reassurance in the form of, "Do you still love me?" Try expressing your feelings directly. "I've been feeling a bit insecure lately, and I could use some extra affection." The first approach puts the burden on him to repeatedly prove himself. The second approach expresses a need without questioning his commitment. It's vulnerable without being accusatory. Remember, secure attachment isn't about never feeling insecure. It's about being able to manage your insecurity without making it your partner's constant problem to solve. It's about building enough internal security that you can handle temporary uncertainty without falling apart. It's about trusting that you're lovable enough that you don't need constant external validation to feel okay. When you can do this, when you can stand in your own worth, without needing constant reassurance, you become more attractive. You become easier to love because loving you doesn't feel like an exhausting full-time job of managing your anxiety. You become a more secure partner, which creates a more secure relationship, which actually gives you less reason to feel insecure in the first place. Habit 5, keeping score and being critical. The fifth habit that can make men lose interest is one that often develops gradually and unconsciously. Keeping score in the relationship and being overly critical. This is when you're constantly tracking who did what, who gave more, who made more effort, who sacrificed more. It's when you notice every flaw, every mistake, every way he falls short of your expectations, and you either point it out or let it build into resentment. And while accountability in relationships is important, this scorekeeping and constant criticism creates a toxic dynamic that kills attraction and affection. Let me start by explaining how this habit typically develops. Often it comes from a place of hurt and frustration. Maybe you feel like you're giving more to the relationship than you're receiving. Maybe you've made compromises and adjustments, and you don't feel like he's reciprocating. Maybe past relationships taught you that you needed to keep track, to protect yourself from being taken advantage of, to make sure things stayed fair. Or maybe you have certain expectations for how a partner should behave, and he's not meeting them, not because he's deliberately failing, but because his way of showing love and care looks different from what you're expecting. So you find yourself constantly noticing what he's not doing, what he should be doing differently, how he could be better. Here's what happens when you fall into this pattern. The relationship stops being about love, connection, and partnership, and becomes about measurement, judgment, and criticism. Every interaction gets evaluated. Every gesture gets weighed against what you've done. Every imperfection gets noted and added to a running tally of disappointments. And from his perspective, this feels terrible. Imagine being in a relationship where you're constantly being evaluated, where nothing you do is quite good enough, where your partner keeps a mental ledger of every time you fell short, where expressions of appreciation are rare, but complaints and criticisms are frequent, where you feel like you're constantly being compared to some ideal standard and found lacking. That doesn't inspire a person to try harder or do better. It makes them defensive, it makes them resentful, it makes them withdraw, because nobody wants to be in a relationship where they're constantly failing, constantly being criticized, constantly reminded of their shortcomings. There's a principle in relationship psychology called the 5-to-1 ratio. Research shows that for every negative interaction in a relationship, you need 5 positive interactions to maintain satisfaction and stability. When you're keeping score and being critical, you're flooding the relationship with negative interactions and not nearly enough positive ones to balance it out. Think about what you focus on in the relationship. When you're with him, are you noticing what he's doing right or what he's doing wrong? When he does something nice, do you appreciate it, or do you immediately think, well, he should have done this sooner, or this doesn't make up for that other thing he did? When he falls short in some way, do you give him grace, or do you add it to your mental list of grievances? This habit of scorekeeping often manifests in comparisons. You compare him to past partners, to your friends' partners, to some idealized version of what you think he should be. My ex always remembered to do this. Sarah's husband would never act that way. If he really cared, he would do what I need without me having to ask. But these comparisons are poisonous. First, they're fundamentally unfair. You're comparing one real, flawed human to either a curated highlight reel of someone else's relationship or to an impossible ideal that exists only in your mind. Second, they communicate profound disrespect. You're essentially telling him that he's not measuring up, that he's inferior, that you wish he were someone different. The critical component of this habit is equally damaging. When you're constantly pointing out flaws, mistakes, and shortcomings, you create an atmosphere of judgment and negativity. You might think you're being helpful, that you're just trying to help him improve or make the relationship better. But criticism rarely works that way, especially when it's frequent and harsh. What criticism actually does is make people defensive and resistant. When someone feels constantly criticized, they stop being open to feedback because feedback has become synonymous with attack. They stop trying to please you because nothing they do seems good enough anyway. They start hiding parts of themselves, being less authentic, less vulnerable, because vulnerability just opens them up to more criticism. There's a difference between constructive feedback and constant criticism. Constructive feedback is specific, timely, and balanced with appreciation. It addresses behaviors, not character. It comes from a place of wanting to improve the relationship, not from a place of judgment or superiority. Constant criticism, on the other hand, is about tearing down. It's about highlighting flaws. It's about keeping that running tally of everything that's wrong. Let me give you a concrete example. Say he cooks dinner for you. something he doesn't do often. He's trying, making an effort to do something nice. A critical response might be, "This is nice, but you didn't clean up as you went, and now the kitchen is a mess." Or, "You used way too much salt in this." Or, "It's about time you cooked. I've been doing it for weeks." Do you see how that deflates the gesture? Instead of appreciating the effort and the care behind it, you're immediately pointing out what's wrong. The message he receives is, "My efforts aren't good enough. I tried to do something nice and I'm being criticized for it. Why should I bother?" Contrast that with a response that appreciates first. "Thank you so much for cooking. This is really sweet of you. I love that you made my favorite." If you need to address the kitchen mess, you can do it later, gently and separately, from the appreciation of his effort. This principle applies across the board. When he makes an effort, appreciate it before you critique it. When he does something thoughtful, acknowledge it fully rather than immediately noting what else he should have done. When he falls short, consider whether it needs to be addressed at all, and if it does, whether it can be done with kindness rather than criticism. Now, I want to be clear. I'm not saying you should never have standards or expectations. I'm not saying you should accept poor treatment or ignore legitimate problems. What I'm saying is that constant scorekeeping and criticism are counterproductive ways of addressing concerns in a relationship. They don't actually improve things. They just create resentment and distance on both sides. The scorekeeping mentality assumes that relationships are transactional, that they need to be exactly equal at all times, that every effort needs to be matched. But healthy relationships aren't like that. They're fluid. Sometimes one person gives more because they have more to give. Sometimes the other person needs more support. Sometimes the balance shifts, and that's okay. What matters is that over time, both people feel valued, appreciated, and cared for. Not that every action is perfectly reciprocated. When you keep score, you're also often ignoring the ways he does contribute that don't fit your specific measuring system. Maybe he doesn't plan elaborate dates, but he's always there when you need him emotionally. Maybe he doesn't express affection verbally as much as you'd like, but he shows love through actions, through reliability, through providing, through fixing things, through protecting you. People express love in different ways. If you're only counting the ways that match your expectations and ignoring or devaluing the ways he naturally shows care, you're not seeing the full picture. You're operating from a place of, "He should love me the way I want to be loved," rather than, "Let me recognize how he's already showing love, even if it looks different than what I expected." The criticism habit also tends to focus disproportionately on the negative. Human brains have a negativity bias. We naturally notice and remember negative experiences more than positive ones. So if you're not actively working against this bias, you'll naturally focus more on what's wrong than what's right. You'll remember the one time he forgot to call when he said he would, but overlook the 99 times he called reliably. Over time, this creates a distorted view of the relationship and of him. You start to see him primarily through the lens of his flaws and failures rather than his strengths and contributions. And that perception becomes reality in your mind. You forget why you were attracted to him in the first place. You lose sight of his positive qualities. You build a case in your mind for why he's not good enough, why the relationship isn't working, why you're dissatisfied. So how do you break this habit? First, become aware of it. Notice when you're keeping score. Catch yourself when you're about to criticize. Pay attention to the ratio of positive to negative interactions you're having. Second, actively practice appreciation. Make it a daily habit to notice and acknowledge things he does well, things you appreciate about him, efforts he makes. Don't take good things for granted. Express gratitude for the ordinary and the extraordinary. Build a culture of appreciation in the relationship rather than criticism. Third, let go of the scorecards. Stop tracking who did what and when. Trust that over time things balance out. Focus on being generous without expectation of immediate reciprocation. Give because you want to, because you care, not because you're building credit you can later cash in. Fourth, adjust your expectations. Are they realistic? Are they fair? Are they based on who he actually is or on who you wish he were? Are you expecting perfection while offering yourself grace for your own shortcomings? Make sure your standards are humane and achievable, not impossible ideals that set everyone up for failure. Fifth, when you do need to address a concern, do it with kindness and specificity. Instead of general criticism like, "You never help around the house," try specific kind requests. "I've been feeling overwhelmed with housework lately. Could we sit down and figure out a way to divide tasks that feels fair to both of us?" And finally, remember that the goal isn't to win at relationships, to be right, to prove that you're giving more or that he's failing. The goal is to build a loving, supportive partnership where both people feel valued and appreciated. Scorekeeping and criticism work directly against that goal. They create competition instead of collaboration, judgment instead of acceptance, resentment instead of affection. When you can let go of the scorecard, when you can shift from criticism to appreciation, you create space for love to flourish. You create an environment where both of you can be imperfect humans who are trying your best, where efforts are acknowledged even when they fall short of ideal, where there's room to grow without constant judgment. And interestingly, when you stop criticizing and start appreciating, he often naturally steps up. When people feel appreciated and valued, they want to do more. When they feel criticized and inadequate, they withdraw. So the very thing you're trying to achieve through criticism, improvement, and more effort is often better achieved through appreciation and positive reinforcement. Habit 6. Neglecting your feminine energy. The sixth habit that can cause men to lose interest is something that's deeply misunderstood and often controversial. In modern discourse, neglecting your feminine energy. Now, before anyone reacts to the term feminine energy, let me be very clear about what I mean and what I don't mean. I'm not talking about stereotypical limiting gender roles. I'm not suggesting women should be submissive, passive, or traditionally domestic. I'm talking about an energetic dynamic, a polarity that exists in romantic relationships, regardless of gender roles in other areas of life. Let me explain. Masculine and feminine energy aren't about gender. They're about qualities we all possess in varying degrees. Masculine energy is about direction, purpose, action, provision, protection, logic, stability. Feminine energy is about receptivity, flow, emotion, nurturing, intuition, expression. Every person, regardless of gender, has both energies within them. But for sexual polarity, for that magnetic attraction that sustains long-term romantic interest, there typically needs to be a dynamic where one person leads more with masculine energy and the other leads more with feminine energy. Now, in modern life, especially as capable, successful, independent women, we're often required to operate primarily in our masculine energy. In our careers, we need to be decisive, strategic, goal-oriented, assertive. In managing households, especially as single mothers or primary breadwinners, we need to be providers, protectors, problem solvers. We've had to develop strong masculine energy to survive and thrive in a world that often requires it. And these are valuable capabilities. I'm not suggesting for a moment that you should diminish your competence or capability, but here's where it gets tricky. If you bring that same dominant masculine energy into your romantic relationship, if you're always in that driving, directing, managing, controlling mode, you eliminate the polarity that creates sexual attraction. Think about it energetically. If you're operating in masculine energy, being the director, the decision maker, the one in control, the one solving all the problems, the one driving everything forward, What role does that leave for him? It leaves him to be in feminine energy, to be receptive, to be passive, to be following your lead. And if he's a man who naturally operates more in masculine energy, that dynamic will feel wrong to both of you. There won't be any tension, any polarity, any magnetic pull. This doesn't mean you need to pretend to be less capable than you are. It doesn't mean playing dumb or helpless. It doesn't mean giving up your intelligence, your success, your independence. What it means is learning when to soften, when to step back, when to let him lead, when to be in your receptive rather than your directive energy. Let me give you some examples of what this looks like practically. Neglecting feminine energy might mean always being the one to plan dates, to make decisions about where to go and what to do, to organize your time together, to direct the relationship. It might mean never asking for help, never showing vulnerability, never letting him see you as anything less than completely capable and in control. It might mean approaching everything, including intimacy and romance, from a logical, strategic, goal-oriented place. It might mean being critical, always correcting, always managing how things are done. It might mean never softening your energy, never being playful, never letting your guard down, never showing your more emotional, expressive side. In essence, you're bringing the same energy you use at work, the same energy you use to manage your household or raise your kids, directly into your romantic relationship. And that energy, while effective for getting things done, is not the energy that creates romantic attraction. Here's what many women don't realize. For many men, part of what makes them feel masculine, what allows them to step into their masculine energy, is being with a woman who's in her feminine energy. When you're soft, receptive, emotionally expressive, allowing him to lead in certain areas, appreciating his masculine qualities, it brings out his desire to protect, provide, pursue, and take care of you. But when you're operating in masculine energy, being the director and controller, it doesn't allow him to step into that role. In fact, it often emasculates him, not because you're more capable, but because the dynamic doesn't allow for the polarity that creates attraction. Now, I know this is a sensitive topic. Women have fought hard for equality, for the right to be strong and capable and independent. And I'm not suggesting you give any of that up. What I'm suggesting is that there's a difference between being capable and being constantly in masculine energy. You can be an incredibly strong, successful, independent woman and still access your feminine energy in your intimate relationships. Think about it this way. You wouldn't go to a dance and have both partners try to lead. The dance doesn't work that way. Someone leads and someone follows. And you switch back and forth, creating a beautiful flow. It's not about one being better or more important than the other. It's about complementary roles that create harmony and movement. Similarly, in relationships, there's a dance between masculine and feminine energy. And when both people are trying to lead, when both are in masculine energy, the dance doesn't work. There's no flow, there's friction instead of harmony. So what does it look like to access your feminine energy more? It means allowing yourself to be softer sometimes, to be vulnerable, to express your emotions rather than always being logical and in control. It means allowing him to plan sometimes, to make decisions, to lead in areas where he has strength or interest. It means asking for help and actually letting him help you, rather than insisting you can handle everything yourself. It means appreciating and admiring his masculine qualities, his strength, his capability, his provision, whatever form those take for him. It means being receptive to his efforts, rather than immediately redirecting or taking over. It means playing, being spontaneous, being emotionally expressive, being in your body rather than always in your head. It means softening your energy physically, relaxing your body, softening your face, opening your posture. Masculine energy is often in a tense, ready-for-action state. Feminine energy is more relaxed, more flowing, more present in sensation rather than constantly thinking and planning ahead. Let me share an example. Imagine you're planning a weekend together. The masculine energy approach is you research options, create an itinerary, make reservations, coordinate logistics, direct where you're going and when. You're efficient, capable, making sure everything runs smoothly. The feminine energy approach might be you express what you're in the mood for. Maybe you share how you've been feeling and what kind of experience would feel good. And then you allow him space to plan something, to surprise you, to take the lead. You're responsive rather than directive. You appreciate what he plans rather than critiquing it or taking over. Both approaches can get you to a nice weekend, but which creates more attraction, more polarity, more appreciation when he gets to show up, to plan, to lead, to surprise you, and you get to be delighted, appreciative, receptive. It creates a dynamic that feeds attraction. When you do all the planning and directing, it's efficient but not particularly sexy. Or consider this: you're facing a challenge, something stressful at work or with family. The masculine energy approach is to handle it yourself, to problem solve, to strategize, to show that you don't need help or support. The feminine energy approach is to share what you're going through, to be vulnerable about how it's affecting you, to allow him to offer support, advice, or simply presence, to let him feel like he can help or protect you in some way. Again, both approaches have their place, but one creates intimacy and allows him to feel needed and valued. The other keeps him at arm's length. I want to emphasize, this isn't about being weak or helpless. It's about being open, receptive, and allowing yourself to receive. Strong, capable women often struggle with receiving. We're so used to giving, doing, managing, that we forget how to receive, to allow, to let someone else carry some weight. But receiving is a feminine quality that's deeply attractive. When you can receive his efforts, his care, his provision, his protection, whatever form that takes, with genuine appreciation and openness, it makes him feel valued and successful as a man. It creates a positive feedback loop where he wants to give more and you get to receive more. The challenge here is that neglecting feminine energy is often so deeply ingrained that you might not even realize you're doing it. You might think you're being in feminine energy when you're actually still directing and controlling, just doing it more softly. True feminine energy is about letting go of control, trusting, flowing, responding, rather than initiating and directing everything. So how do you shift this if you recognize it as a pattern? First, become aware of your default energy. Notice when you're in masculine mode, directing, controlling, problem-solving, tension in your body, focused on tasks and outcomes. Notice the difference when you're in feminine mode, relaxed, present, expressive, receptive, focused on feelings and experience. Second, practice consciously shifting into feminine energy when you're with him. Soften your body. Take some deep breaths. Get out of your head and into sensation and emotion. Let go of the need to control how things go. Allow yourself to be surprised. Be responsive to what he offers rather than immediately redirecting. Third, let him lead in some areas. This doesn't mean he leads in everything or that you follow blindly. It means finding areas where you can step back, where you can let him take charge, where you can be supportive rather than directive. Maybe he plans some dates. Maybe he makes decisions about certain things. Maybe he handles certain problems or tasks. Give him space to step up. Fourth, practice receiving. When he offers help, say yes and let him help. When he does something nice, receive it graciously, without immediately critiquing or taking over. When he compliments you, simply say thank you rather than deflecting or downplaying. Practice letting good things in. And fifth, access your emotional, expressive, playful side. Feminine energy is alive in emotion and expression. Allow yourself to feel deeply and express what you feel. Allow yourself to be playful, spontaneous, creative. Do things that get you into your body and out of your head. Dancing, movement, anything sensual or expressive. Remember, the goal isn't to become someone you're not. It's to access the full range of who you are. You can be strong and soft. You can be capable and vulnerable. You can be independent and receptive. You can be successful in your masculine energy in your career and other areas of life, and shift into more feminine energy in your intimate relationship. When you do this, when you honor both the masculine and feminine within you, and allow polarity in your relationship, you create the kind of dynamic that sustains attraction long-term. You give him space to be in his masculine energy, which makes him feel alive and purposeful, and you get to rest into your feminine energy, which feels nourishing and sensual and connecting. That's the kind of relationship that stays vibrant and exciting, not one where both people are competing to be in masculine energy and nobody's allowing themselves to soften and receive. Habit 7. Losing your sense of playfulness and joy. The seventh and final habit that can make men lose interest is something that often happens. So gradually, you don't even notice it. Losing your sense of playfulness and joy. This is when everything becomes serious, heavy, dutiful, when the relationship feels like work, like another responsibility, like something to manage and maintain rather than something to enjoy and celebrate. Think back to the beginning of your relationship, or to times when you felt most alive and happy. There was probably lightness there, playfulness, laughter, spontaneity, joy. You weren't taking everything so seriously. You could be silly together. You could laugh at yourselves. You could play. There was a sense of fun, of adventure, of enjoying the moment rather than constantly worrying about the future or analyzing the past. But somewhere along the way, especially in longer relationships, or as responsibilities pile up, or as past hurts accumulate, that lightness often disappears. The relationship becomes another item on the to-do list, another area of life that requires management and effort, another space where you need to be responsible, serious, mature, careful. You stop being playful. You stop laughing as much. You stop doing things just for fun. Everything has to have a purpose, a reason, a productive outcome. Conversations become serious discussions about logistics, problems, responsibilities. Physical affection becomes goal-oriented rather than playful and spontaneous. You've forgotten how to just be, how to enjoy, how to play. And this is deadly for attraction, because attraction isn't sustained by duty and responsibility. It's sustained by joy, by pleasure, by fun, by those moments when you're both laughing so hard you can't breathe, when you're being silly and ridiculous together, when you're doing something spontaneous and adventurous, when you're playing. Men, like all people, want to be with someone who brings lightness and joy into their life, not just more heaviness and responsibility. They want to be with someone who makes life more fun, not more burdensome. They want to be with someone who can laugh, who can be spontaneous, who hasn't lost the ability to play and enjoy life. When you lose your playfulness, when everything becomes serious and heavy, the relationship starts to feel like a chore. He starts to feel like he can never quite measure up to your seriousness, your intensity, your focus on what's wrong or what needs to be fixed. He starts to associate being with you with heaviness rather than lightness, and slowly he withdraws. Not because he doesn't care, but because the relationship has stopped being a source of joy and has become another burden. This habit often develops from very understandable places. Life gets hard, responsibilities accumulate, stress builds up. Past disappointments and hurts make you more guarded, more serious, more self-protective. You've been through things, and maintaining that playful, carefree energy feels impossible or even irresponsible. Maybe you're dealing with financial stress, work pressure, family obligations, health concerns. Maybe past relationships have made you cynical or wary. Maybe you feel like you need to always be vigilant, always on guard, always serious about protecting yourself and what you've built. Maybe you've unconsciously absorbed the message that, as a mature woman, you should be serious, responsible, no nonsense. That playfulness is for children or for women who don't have real responsibilities. That joy and spontaneity are luxuries you can't afford when there's so much to worry about and manage. But here's the truth: playfulness and joy aren't luxuries. They're necessities. They're what make life worth living. They're what make relationships worth having. And they're absolutely essential for maintaining attraction and connection. Think about what initially drew him to you. Yes, maybe your intelligence, your capability, your maturity, but also probably your smile, your laugh, your energy, your ability to make him feel lighter, to make life feel more fun. That's what creates attraction. That's what makes someone want to be around you, to spend time with you, to build a life with you. When you lose that, when you become all responsibility and no joy, all seriousness and no play, you've lost something essential. You've lost the part of yourself that makes love feel good, that makes connection feel worth pursuing. Let me be clear about what playfulness and joy look like in an adult relationship. I'm not talking about being childish or irresponsible. I'm not talking about ignoring problems or avoiding serious conversations. I'm talking about maintaining the ability to find lightness even amidst life's heaviness, to laugh even when things are hard, to be spontaneous even when there's a lot to manage, to approach life and love with a sense of adventure and possibility rather than with grim determination and worry. Playfulness might look like surprising him with something fun, not because you planned it meticulously, but because you felt spontaneous. It might look like laughing at yourselves when things go wrong instead of immediately getting stressed. It might look like being physically playful, tickling, teasing, being affectionate in silly ways. It might look like trying new things together just for the fun of it, without needing them to be perfect or productive. Joy might look like genuinely being happy to see him, rather than immediately launching into a list of things that need to be discussed or done. It might look like appreciating small moments of beauty or pleasure, rather than always focusing on what's wrong or what's next. It might look like expressing delight, enthusiasm, excitement about things in life, rather than approaching everything with caution and seriousness. When you maintain playfulness and joy, you create a relationship that feels alive, vibrant, exciting. You create an atmosphere where both of you want to be, where being together feels like a gift rather than an obligation. You remind each other why you chose this, why you love each other, what makes life worth living. But when you lose playfulness and joy, everything becomes transactional and heavy. Intimacy becomes a chore. Time together feels obligatory rather than desired. The relationship becomes something you're both enduring rather than enjoying. And in that atmosphere, attraction dies. Not because of any one specific thing, but because the whole experience of being together has become joyless. Let me give you some specific examples of how this manifests. Maybe you used to dance together in the kitchen while cooking. Now you're efficient and task-focused, no music, no joy, just getting dinner done. Maybe you used to joke around and tease each other. Now everything's serious. You've lost the ability to laugh at yourselves or each other. Maybe you used to be spontaneous, saying yes to random adventures or last-minute plans. Now everything has to be scheduled, planned, thought through. There's no room for spontaneity because there's too much to worry about, too many responsibilities. Maybe you used to be affectionate in playful ways throughout the day. Now all physical affection is either goal-oriented, leading to sex, or perfunctory, just going through the motions. Maybe you used to find joy in simple things, appreciating small pleasures, being present with each other. Now you're always thinking about what's next, what needs to be done, what problems need to be solved. You've lost the ability to just be, to just enjoy the moment you're in. Or maybe you used to share laughter easily, finding humor in daily life. Now your conversations are all serious, all heavy, all about problems and responsibilities and concerns. When was the last time you laughed together until your sides hurt? When was the last time you did something just because it sounded fun? Here's what happens psychologically when playfulness and joy disappear from a relationship. Both people start to associate being together with heaviness. The relationship stops being a refuge from life's stress and becomes another source of stress. Instead of feeling lighter when you're together, he feels heavier. Instead of looking forward to seeing you, he starts to dread the serious conversations, the lack of lightness, the joyless atmosphere. And this creates a downward spiral as the relationship becomes more serious and joyless. As the energy between you becomes heavier, both of you withdraw more. You're less open, less warm, less present. And the less warm and present you both are, the more serious and joyless things become. It feeds on itself until you're two people coexisting in heavy silence, having lost the vitality that made the relationship worth having. Men especially are drawn to women who light up their world, who make life feel more fun, more alive, more worth living, not because men are shallow or because they don't want deep connection, but because joy is magnetic, playfulness is attractive, lightness is appealing. When you can bring those qualities to a relationship, even amidst life's very real challenges and responsibilities, you create something precious. And here's the beautiful thing. When you maintain joy and playfulness, it actually makes dealing with serious stuff easier. When you have a foundation of joy and connection, when you've been laughing together and enjoying each other, then when you do need to have a serious conversation or deal with a challenge, you come to it from a place of connection rather than from a place of distance. The serious stuff doesn't feel as heavy because it's balanced by the joy. So how do you reclaim playfulness and joy if you've lost it? First, you have to recognize that you've lost it. Notice how you show up in the relationship. Are you bringing lightness or heaviness? Are you finding reasons to laugh or reasons to worry? Are you present and enjoying moments together or always thinking about what's next? Second, consciously choose joy. This might feel artificial at first if you're out of practice, but start making choices that prioritize joy and pleasure. What activities make you feel light and happy? What makes you laugh? What brings you into the present moment? Do more of those things. Share them with him. Third, lower the stakes. Not everything has to be so serious. Not every conversation has to be about problems. Not every moment has to be productive. Allow yourself and the relationship to just be sometimes without agenda or purpose other than enjoying being together. Fourth, practice playfulness intentionally. Be silly. Try something new. Be spontaneous. Break your normal routines. Do something just for fun without worrying about whether it's the perfect choice. Tease each other gently. Be physically playful. Dance, play games, laugh at yourselves. Fifth, cultivate gratitude and appreciation for small pleasures. Notice beautiful moments. Express delight in simple things. Share what brings you joy. Allow yourself to feel. Express happiness rather than dampening it with worry or criticism. And sixth, manage your stress and heaviness separately from the relationship. Yes, he's your partner and you should be able to share your burdens. But if every interaction is heavy, if you're only showing up with problems and stress, you're conditioning him to associate you with heaviness. Find other outlets too. Have friends you can vent to. Have practices that help you process stress. Come to the relationship from a place of already managing your challenges, rather than expecting him to fix them or carry them all. Remember, the relationships that last, that stay vibrant and alive, are the ones where both people maintain the ability to play, to laugh, to enjoy life together, where there's lightness alongside the depth, where responsibility is balanced with spontaneity, where serious conversations happen in a context of overall joy and connection. When you can bring this back into your relationship, when you can reclaim your playfulness and joy, you become magnetic again. You remind him why he fell for you. You create an environment where love can flourish because it feels good to be together, not just dutiful or obligatory. These 7 habits, these 7 patterns that can subtly push men away, they all share something in common. They're born from self-protection, from past hurts, from trying to prevent pain or maintain control. Over-functioning, leading with logic, making him your whole world, seeking constant reassurance, keeping score, neglecting your feminine energy, losing your joy. They're all defensive strategies. They're all ways we try to protect ourselves, or prove our worth, or prevent being hurt again. But here's the paradox. The very strategies we use to protect ourselves often create the outcome we're trying to avoid. We overfunction to keep things together, but it pushes him away. We lead with logic to stay safe, but it prevents intimacy. We make him our center to show commitment, but it makes us less interesting. We seek constant reassurance to calm anxiety, but it creates the distance we fear. We keep score to protect against being taken advantage of, but it kills affection. We stay in masculine energy to stay in control, but it eliminates attraction. We lose our joy to stay protected, but it makes the relationship joyless for both of you. The question then becomes, are you willing to do something different? Are you willing to risk being more vulnerable, more trusting, more open? Are you willing to maintain your own life, your own joy, your own wholeness, even within a relationship? Are you willing to soften, to let go of control sometimes, to access different parts of yourself? Because here's what I want you to understand. You are not broken. These habits, these patterns, they made sense at some point. They served a purpose. They protected you, but they might not be serving you anymore. And you have the power to choose differently. You have the power to create space instead of over-functioning. You have the power to share your emotional truth instead of hiding behind logic. You have the power to maintain your own full life instead of making him your everything. You have the power to build internal security instead of seeking constant external reassurance. You have the power to appreciate instead of criticize. You have the power to access your feminine energy alongside your masculine strength. You have the power to choose joy and playfulness even when life is hard. These changes aren't about becoming someone different. They're about becoming more fully yourself, accessing the parts of you that might have gone into hiding for self-protection. They're about showing up more authentically, more vulnerably, more wholly in your relationships. And I want to be clear, not every relationship is meant to last. Sometimes recognizing these patterns helps you see that the relationship wasn't right to begin with. Sometimes the relationship ending isn't about your habits. It's about fundamental incompatibility or him not being ready or willing to meet you halfway. Not every man deserves your best self, but if you're with someone good, someone worthy of your love, someone capable of being a real partner, then understanding these patterns gives you the power to create something beautiful. It gives you the power to stop inadvertently sabotaging your own happiness. Remember that love isn't about being perfect. It's not about never making mistakes or always getting it right. It's about being willing to grow, to learn, to adjust, to see yourself honestly and make conscious choices about who you want to be in relationships. So if you found yourself in any of these 7 habits, don't feel ashamed. Feel empowered, because awareness is the first step toward change. You can't change what you can't see. Now you see it. Now you can choose differently. And I hope this video has given you not just awareness of what might be pushing men away, but also a clear path forward, practical ways to shift these patterns, actionable steps you can take starting today to create healthier, more attractive relationship dynamics. Before you go, I want to ask you to do something for me. If this video resonated with you, if you had moments of recognition or insight, please hit that like button. It helps more women discover this content. Share this video with friends who might benefit from these insights. Sometimes the kindest thing we can do for someone we care about is help them see their blind spots with compassion. Drop a comment below and let me know which of these 7 habits you recognized in yourself. What insights did you gain? What are you going to work on? I read every comment and I love hearing from you. Your sharing helps create a community where we can all learn and grow together. And if you're not already subscribed to the Heart Code, please subscribe and turn on notifications. We release content regularly that dives deep into the psychology of relationships, attraction, and personal growth. This isn't surface-level advice. This is deep, transformative work that can genuinely change how you experience love and relationships. Finally, if you really want to support this channel and the work we do creating this comprehensive, research-based, ad-free content for you, please consider using the Super Thanks feature below this video. Your support directly enables us to continue providing this level of depth and insight. It helps us research, write, and produce content that genuinely serves you, rather than chasing algorithms or advertisers. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for being willing to look at yourself honestly and do this work. Thank you for caring enough about your relationships and your own happiness to invest time in understanding these dynamics. Remember, you are worthy of a beautiful, healthy, vibrant relationship. You deserve a partner who sees you, appreciates you, and chooses you every day. And you have everything you need within you to create that kind of relationship. Sometimes you just need to clear away the habits and patterns that are blocking it from flourishing. I believe in you. I believe in your capacity to grow, to change, to create the love life you truly desire. Keep doing the work. Keep showing up. Keep choosing growth over protection. The rewards are absolutely worth it. Until next time, take care of yourself, be kind to yourself, and remember that understanding is the first step toward transformation. You've got this.